My name is Phil Smith, and I'm interpreter based in Geneva, from where I'm talking to you today. Today, I'm going to conduct an interview with Louise Jarvis, and we're going to talk about interpreting schools. Louise is a conference interpreter based in the United Kingdom. She's talking to us today from Oxford, and she's also a teacher at the University of Bath, where she teaches interpreting. Hello, Louise.
Hello, good morning.
Do you think we should just close down interpreting schools? Have they not outlived their usefulness? The market is saturated, and we have the effect of the COVID crisis.
Well, it's true that the last year in particular has been very difficult for freelance interpreters. And it's true that the COVID pandemic has caused an unprecedented slump in the interpreting market. There's no denying that. But in interpreting schools, we're thinking beyond the pandemic to a brighter future. And I think it's undeniable that the medium-term prospects are good.
So you think that we're going through a difficult period at the moment, but you think that once we settle down post-COVID, things are looking better?
Yes, absolutely. And we have tangible evidence to support that statement from people like the head of the English booth at the European Commission in Brussels and from the United Nations in Geneva, where you live.
How do you make sure when you're taking people on a interpreting school that you get people of the right quality, the right caliber? Is the entry testing very stringent?
Yes, absolutely. I teach at the University of Bath, as you've already said. And we, first of all, we carry out a lot of outreach. So we visit careers services at various universities to promote our courses and thus try to attract a pool of talented potential students. Those students are then invited for aptitude tests, and it's on the basis of that they're offered or not offered a place on our programme.
It's interesting that you say that you see the medium term as quite positive. Whenever a group of interpreters get together, they say that there are far too many people coming onto the market, a market which they see as saturated, and they feel that the interpreting schools should stop, churning out, for want of a better word, more graduates. Do you feel that their perception is wrong? Is the market not that saturated?
Well, you're quite right. Of course, as a freelance interpreter myself, I've heard people say that, and I've heard the very verb you used, churn out. No, I would take issue with that. I think particularly, it depends on the language combination, doesn't it? And it depends on the booth. But at Bath, we're specialising in training pure English booth interpreters. And it's clear that there's still great demand for new talent in the English booth. Perhaps I could just refer back to something I said earlier. Recently, the head of the English booth at the European Commission, and that's John Swales, said that the median age of English booth interpreters at the European Commission is 50. And that 30% of freelance work is carried out by freelancers in their 60s. And so he was making the point that they desperately need new blood in the English booth in Brussels. And the same is true of the United Nations in Geneva, where they're very keen to interview and test our successful students with combinations like French and Russian into English.
That's interesting. You say that the European Union has announced there's going to be a need for English interpreters, despite Brexit?
Very good question. Yes, absolutely. There's still going to be demand for English in most international meetings after Brexit, not only in the EU, but also, of course, internationally. It's true that English or Globish offers an alternative to interpretation. People can, by and large, make themselves understood in large parts of the world using a form of English. But what they can't do is negotiate successfully and have very precise, nuanced conversations. That's only possible if they use their mother tongue.
Yes, I suppose in the European Union, you're actually talking about legislation, aren't you? Not just general things. It's very, very specific.
It's very specific, exactly.
You spoke about doing your best to get good people onto your courses. You mentioned doing outreach, and that you make sure that they're really up to scratch. Does it happen that someone might come onto an interpreting course and you say, we think you have potential, but your Italian's not quite there yet, your German's not quite there yet. Go away and do something about it and then come back. Does that ever happen?
Yes, that happens. Yes, I think it's preferable for potential students to hone their language skills and knowledge of their passive languages before doing the interpreting course. You could do it afterwards, and indeed some students do the course and then afterwards go and spend some time in the country that speaks their languages. But yes, doing it beforehand is a good idea. And another thing we do often is offer advice to students who about the languages to study on the course. So you might have a student coming along in the fortunate position of being able to offer German, Russian and French. And you can see the problem. They're straddling two markets, the European market on the one hand and the UN market on the other. And they need to choose two to focus on. So we'll maybe suggest, depending on their background, we'll suggest either French and Russian or French and German, but not really German and Russian.
You say two to focus on. You suggest by that you don't teach people to work into English from more than two languages.
No, that's right. We think that means that students are too thinly spread. We want them to learn how to interpret from two languages into English. And then we feel that once that huge task has been done, they can then spend some time adding a third language. Why not?
Yeah, I see the point. You're saying that the effort to learn the actual skills that you need to become an interpreter, to learn your craft as an interpreter, is already quite a big ask. So us expecting them to do it in another language might be a bit too much. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, absolutely, yes. Students are able to audit, what we call audit, an extra language unit if they wish. So we have a student this year who's doing French and Russian, and she's also attending Spanish classes, but she won't sit the exams in Spanish and she won't receive a qualification in Spanish.
French, Russian and Spanish is a very good combination where I live.
Exactly, I know, yes.
Yeah, exactly. Encourage her.
Yes.
It was interesting. Earlier you said that you do your very level best to get good people onto the course. Once someone's started a course, I mean, I don't know how you can speak for other interpreting schools, how rigorous can you be? Basically, can you throw them off the course, given the fact that they've probably paid you some money, and also given the fact that you have to fit in with a university structure, a university administration?
Yeah.
I suppose I'm talking about academic rigor versus administrative reality.
Yes. And this is a debate that's often appears in the press, the debate between financial viability and academic rigor. Universities are often taken to task about that. So you make an important point. We don't want to throw anyone off the course. We don't want to fail anybody at the end. Because the whole point is that we have selected the students carefully on the basis that we believe they have the talent and skills to be able to pass. So it happens very, very rarely, and should happen very, very rarely. If it happens, it means that to some extent we've made a mistake, if you like.
Yeah, I can see that point. You spoke earlier about people studying, choosing which languages to study. My feeling, and I was a teacher back in the dim and distant past, is that your best bet as an interpreter is to take sort of what I would call core languages, important bread and butter languages, and then maybe plus one exotic, but don't put all your eggs in the exotic basket, because then you can become too dependent on one user of those languages. Is that a fair point? I mean, is that the sort of advice you can give?
Yes, I fully agree with that. I think it's best to focus on bread and butter languages to start with. So at Bath, it's French, German, Italian, Spanish, Russian. And then once you've learnt the craft of interpreting, you can then perhaps add an exotic language. But if you add an exotic language, you have to, I think you're at the whim of the market, at the mercy of the whims of the market to a certain extent, because well, we've seen in the past that, for example, Swedish was flavour of the month at one point, and we saw various interpreters learning Swedish, and now Swedish isn't used so much in EU meetings. So you need those bread and butter languages first, I think.
What sort of contact do you as a university have, a interpreting department have with the users? I mean, I suppose the UN is easier in the sense that it's not going to change. It doesn't juggle so many languages. But say with the European Union, what sort of contact do you have with them about what their languages are going to be 5 years, 10 years hence?
Yeah, we have very close contact with the European institutions, mainly the European Parliament and the European Commission on the one hand, and the UN on the other. And your point is right that the UN has its 6 official languages. They're not going to change anytime soon. And the needs of the UN are not going to change anytime soon. In the EU, it's a little bit different. So we have memorandums of understanding with the European Parliament and the UN at Bath. And this means that the Parliament and the Commission provide us with pedagogical assistance, so they'll come and train our students for a couple of days at a time. They also provide virtual classes and they attend our final examinations, sometimes in the capacity of external examiner and sometimes just as observers. And we're also in touch with them about their needs in the future. So it's no secret that the English booth at the European institutions is looking for newcomers with German as a passive language. And after that, I believe it's Italian that is in short supply.
Are you able to help? Do you have many people coming through your system with either of those languages?
We do, although numbers have fallen. So this year we have 4 students with French and German and 3 with French and Italian, but that's not as many as we have with French and Spanish.
I think Mark Twain said that life was too short to learn German. Maybe that's the reason why.
Yes, it's perceived as being a difficult language, isn't it? And it sort of lacks the street cred of Spanish. We might say, yeah. But we can't ignore the fact that there are an awful lot of people in Europe who speak German as their first language.
Yeah, and it will remain an important country in Europe for a considerable time to come. When people graduate from your school, do they tend to work only as interpreters, or do you find that some of them use interpreting as one activity amongst others, one string and a broader bow?
Right. Well, both cases are true, but I think it's probably more usual for graduates to combine interpreting with something else. So that might be something language related, or it might not be. We do have former students, you might be surprised to know, who work as sports commentators, football commentators, alongside interpreting with a special focus on interpreting for football, for the football industry. But a more common example would be graduates who are also doing some translating on the side. And I think that's important. I think it's important to have several strings to your bow, particularly as a freelancer. Freelancers have to be agile, they have to adapt, and I think it's more normal these days in any sector to have a portfolio career rather than to be focused on just one activity.
Yeah, it's interesting you speak about people doing other jobs. I have a feeling there was an interpreter in Brazil who not only was an interpreter in cage fighting.
Oh, right. That is rather unusual.
Rings a bell. But on a more serious note, would you say that you teach portable skills? In other words, if someone isn't going to become an interpreter, can you teach them something that will nevertheless be useful?
Yes, absolutely. And we do have graduates who've completed the course, done very well, could have decided to pursue interpreting, but decide it's not for them, and are able to apply the skills they've learned to a different career, to a related career, but not necessarily in the languages industry. And the kinds of skills I'm referring to are, above all, communication related. So the idea that you can analyse what somebody's saying, distill their message, distill it into concise English, express yourself clearly in a range of registers. All of these skills, communication skills, are invaluable in many sectors.
I want to bring you back to the first, my early ambush. And when I asked about interpreting schools, I don't know, but I suppose it's, what about in interpreting school, instead of maybe graduating people every year, taking them every other year or every 2 years, is that an option at all? Because sometimes, I mean, you feel people coming onto the market now, it's not best time to be doing it, maybe? Is that possible?
It's an interesting question.
Take your foot off the accelerator a bit.
Yes, that's right. Well, I think I'd make 2 points here. The first one is that paradoxically, we have possibly a larger cohort at Bath this year. And I think that reflects the fact that when economic times are tough and when job prospects are poor, it's a good opportunity to train, perhaps to fulfill a long-cherished ambition to be an interpreter, for example. And so we do have a very strong cohort this year in Bath. Yes, so that's the first thing. And then the second thing is that I can see your point, but I think it's quite hard for interpreting schools which are embedded in universities to press the pause button. Because the universities invested a lot of money in facilities, for example, interpreting labs, and the universities have, I'm not full-time, but some full-time staff under contract. So what do those staff do in the years when you've pressed the pause button? And I think the danger is that actually if you turn the tap off, it would be very hard to turn it back on again.
I see. Yeah, that was an connection I hadn't seen when you said that when the economy takes a downturn, as it has now, it's a time when people might consider their options, they might retrench a bit. So that would be a time that they go for training.
Yes.
Yeah. What do you actually teach on your course? Could you give us a quick rundown? I'm not expecting you to give us the whole curriculum in fine detail, but if you could give us some broad brush strokes on what the sort of thing you try to impart.
Yes, I can certainly give you a flavour. Yes, you might be surprised to learn that our students start by honing their English language skills. So most of them are going to be learning to work into English. We do have some Russian and Chinese mother tongue students. But the first thing they study is public speaking, improving their English mother tongue skills. They also work on analysis. So analysing speeches first in English and then in their passive languages, working out the structure of the speech, how the ideas are linked together, what are the primary points, what are the secondary points, what are the details. That's a very important foundation stone for both consecutive and simultaneous interpreting. And then it gets perhaps more traditional. So consecutive, we're teaching how to take notes and add precision to the interpretation. That's after a period of giving back speeches without notes. And then the students go into the booth and apply what they've learnt in consecutive to interpreting simultaneously. So that's pulling out the units of meaning from the French, say, or the German, and expressing those in concise and clear English.
Is your model at Bath based on this idea that consecutive interpreting are the foundation upon which you build simultaneous?
Yes, I don't really see how it could be any other way. Consecutive gives you the skills to analyse, to pull out, as I say, those units of meaning, identifying the links between the ideas and the subjects and the verbs and the objects and the details. And then that's how you subsequently are able to interpret simultaneously.
It's interesting that you said just now that they spend their early time honing their English, I suppose. When you've learnt languages to that extent, you spent the last so many years trying to be as German as you can be or as Italian as you can be, and now suddenly they want you because you're actually a native speaker of English. You do have to kind of change the chip a bit, don't you?
You do, and our students are often a little bit surprised at the emphasis we put on their English. Yes, it's true. Yeah. But that's your final product, isn't it, as an interpreter?
Ultimately, yes. Yeah. So if you imagine you've got before you some people who are thinking that interpreting might be for them. What words of encouragement would you give, or words of advice, perhaps?
Yes, okay. Well, on the encouragement side, I would say that interpreting, it has been for me and remains a wonderful profession. You learn something new every day. Being a fly on the wall in meetings of experts in various different fields is a great privilege. So I think it's a wonderful career and I'd recommend it to anybody. On the advice front, I think you could no better than ensure you read listen to and read quality publications or podcasts in your mother tongue, and also are familiar with current affairs in the countries in which your passive languages are spoken.
Well, I think you've just about convinced me that I think maybe we'll leave interpreting schools open to fight another day. I do take your point that we learn a lot in this business, don't they? What's the expression? Every day's a school day, and it really is. I think as you're an interpreter, you never do stop learning. I think also based on what you said, that a good bit of advice would be to learn German.
Absolutely.
Although that possibly had to happen slightly upstream of listening to this video. But that seems to be certainly a language with a future.
Definitely, yes. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think then I take the point that you can't just turn an interpreting school on and off like a tap.
No.
And I think maybe those of us outside the teaching world are maybe a little bit naive. Well, perhaps naive is not the right word, but maybe don't fully understand the administrative setup, the structure, the teaching staff, and all the arrangements that are involved in producing a school. And as you say, not something you can just switch on and off at will.
No, that's exactly right. And I think there are two other important points which we do have in mind, and hopefully will reassure colleagues. And that is, number one, that we're selecting our students very carefully. So the aptitude testing is careful and we're choosing from a large pool of candidates. And secondly, that we are close to the market. So we're not trying to lead students up the garden path. Far from it. That's the last thing we want to do. We want our students to succeed, and we're mindful of the needs of the market when we train our students.
Yeah, no, that's good. So basically, what you're doing is very much tailored to what the market needs or is going to need in the coming years.
Absolutely, I don't think it can be any other way.
Well, I think that's quite encouraging in a way. That's quite encouraging.
Good, I'm glad to hear it.
Yes, I'll see if I can convince interpreters next time they're all crying into their beer.
Yes, thank you.
But I think maybe to some extent it's maybe. Our problem is maybe one of perception rather than of reality.
Yes, and that's understandable. I think when economic times are hard, it is difficult.
And I think it may not be the same for all languages either. So.
No, that's true, and I can only really speak about the English booth.
We won't go into that now.
No, that's enough for now.
I think that's enough. Well, thank you. It's been very interesting talking to you. I hope you're... final question on a personal. Do you enjoy teaching?
I love teaching. Yes, I do. I love teaching because students are so talented and so keen to learn and work so hard. And it's incredibly rewarding to see them make progress.
Yeah, I enjoy it as well. It's nice to be in touch with young people. It's particularly important for a codger like me.
Well, even I, of course, the students get younger every year, don't they?
Yeah, don't they just like policemen, yes, exactly.
Exactly.
Okay, well, thank you very much. It's been nice to have a bit of a look at interpreting schools, how they operate, and ask a couple of questions that have been on my mind, and I know are on mind of some colleagues, when we get together and chat about these things. So,
well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
I think you may have put some minds at rest. I certainly hope so. And thank you for taking the time out to talk to us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you, Phil.
Take care now. Bye.
Bye. Bye.